Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special NBC Sports Edge Fantasy Baseball Q&A. We're going to be doing something fun today. We're going to be not only talking about World Series Game 6, we're not going to just be answering your questions about prospects today. We're going to look at some baseball cards. And some of you have been joining me for these and have gotten a chance to see me open some stuff. We're going to open a special package today. We're doing Topps Heritage Minor League Baseball. And now, I think anyone knows that this is maybe not their most luxury set, but it's one of my favorites because it's all prospect stuff. And it's also nice that you get, and you can look right here, I always have to get used to the fact that these are, I can't think of the right word, and it doesn't matter, but there are 2 autos per box. So this will be fun. Open this up. Ask me any questions you have about the World Series, about prospect stuff, about keepers for your dynasty leagues or keeper leagues. Whatever you got, I'm happy to do it, and we'll open some cards. Give you some quick thoughts about the World Series. I think it's been a good series. I think it's been a pretty evenly matched series. I think you have to feel pretty good if you're the Braves about the fact that you do have Fried and Anderson starting these next 2 games. Now, Fried has not been great in his last 2 starts, but I certainly count on him a little bit better than some of these other starters. And then Anderson has just been sensational. So if worse comes to worse, you get a guy who has been, I mean, as good of a postseason pitcher as I've seen, rookie or not. And it's still weird to me that he's a rookie. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Tomorrow, Colin Henderson and I will have our Circling the Bases podcast, and we will break everything down, whether we're breaking down the Braves being World Championships or Game 7. So it should be fun. If you're curious what the packs look like, I'll put it up. Yeah. So this is kind of like a throwback. It's kind of weird because it's throwback, but it's also prospects. So it's kind of interesting. It's also the most difficult pack I've ever opened in my entire life, apparently. So there we go. Okay, let's take a look. Yohan Duran, very nice prospect for the Minnesota Twins. Could be a starter for them someday. Braden Shoemaker, a guy who was a first-round pick who really struggled this year, but still have long-term hope for him to be a starter someday. Freddie Valdez, long way to go there. Let's see what we got for birthday there. I always love checking the birthdays. Yeah, just will turn 20 in December, so a long-term prospect. This is a guy who missed a lot of bats this year. Cade Cavalli. Really like him. I do kind of wonder if he's more of a I missed bats because I was playing in levels that I shouldn't have been at, but certainly a prospect to keep an eye on. A lot of people like this guy, Evan Carter. Purely an outfielder. Guy I knew almost nothing about for the draft and made my living covering the draft, so it was surprising to see, but way better than anybody gave him credit for. Alexander Vargas, very young Yankees prospect. If you have a chance to see his autograph, it's pretty funny. It looks like Ali G. Shea Langoliers, a prospect who is a better real-life guy than a fantasy guy, but does have a chance for some fantasy value because he's going to be behind the plate, and he's very good. And then this guy, CJ Abrams, one of the very best prospects in baseball, as long as he's healthy. And, the fact that he's already playing in AFL games after that pretty ugly injury is a good sign. But, yeah. So, yeah, nice started first pack. I like the design of the cards, very old school. Forget the year that they're exactly copying here, but they're nice. I like them. They're not for everybody, but I like them. And again, the prospect thing. I'm not loving the fact that these packs. I almost pre-opened some of these things just to have an idea of what it was like, and I should have. This is what happens when you go live, folks. Crazy things happen. Let's see. Grant McCray, interesting prospect. Probably more of a bench option than a guy I think is going to be a regular, but this guy's not a bad option. Not at all. Brett Beatty, I was so impressed with him in the Arizona Fall League. Man, he tracks the ball so well, and he made such hard contact. I talked about this in a couple podcasts ago. The 110-mile-per-hour triple was just unreal to see. Kanan Smith, a guy who I believe was acquired in the Jameson Taillon trade. Something along that way. Former Yankee, now doesn't play for the Yankees anymore. Again, a fourth outfield prospect, but you know, nothing wrong with that. Kind of a neat card coming up after this one. Jose Tena. The Cleveland, the Guardians now, have a ton of really interesting prospects like this, like high ceiling, interesting floor. I mean, there's a long way to go with this type of profile. But if you're playing in a deeper dynasty league, he's a guy I'd take a look at. This is a fun one. Some of these are mini cards, and as you can see, that's a diminutive Spencer Torkelson. Hopefully we have a chance to talk about him again in this pack, but as good of an offensive prospect as there is in baseball. Isaiah Green, acquired in the Francisco Lindor trade. Good speed, should be a solid center fielder. Hit tool's kind of the question mark there, but a lot to like. And finally, Adolfo. Look, a lot of these White Sox prospects are late bloomer types. I think that's kind of fair to say about Adolfo. Seems like he's been in the system for an awful long time, but there's still upside there. If I'm playing in an AL only keeper league, he's definitely somebody that I would take a look at. All right, 2 down, still no auto yet. And we should get 2 autos. Should get 2. Every once in a while you get an extra third, or sometimes if the auto's real good. No, it's on average is what they say, but yeah, absolutely. Curious what you guys think about the game tonight. Like if you're interested in, if you think it'll be a high-scoring game. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game, but could be. Be curious to see what the over-under is on that as well. Myceler Bina, another long-term prospect. The Twins do really well with this type of profile, though. He's a guy I'm definitely interested in the long term. Oh, there's a lot of long-term guys in this pack. All right. Michael Scotto, definitely a guy who was traded over from the Yankees. Checking out his age. I just love seeing the ages on these things because it just helps me. But a guy who will turn 20 next year and not until June. Offensive talent, definitely. Some question marks about where he's going to play, but there's a lot to like. This guy right here, Robert Poisson, was a guy who was, they call them bonus babies. I hate that term, but he was given a pretty hefty bonus for international play. Hasn't really put it all together yet. Plenty of time. Date of birth here. We're talking about turn 19 on September 11th. So yeah, it's a long way to go, but a person that in a keeper league I'm still hanging on to because there is offensive upside there. And again, CJ Abrams, it's just a matter of if he can stay healthy. I talked to somebody about his stats in terms of like exit velocity and stuff like that are not great. I kind of ignore that stuff, especially with younger prospects, because as I've said in several prospect type stuff or like interviews and stuff like that, I think you should use the stats, but don't let the stats use you. The talent to me suggests that CJ Abrams is a front line future top of the order hitter, and in fantasy he's even more valuable because he's going to steal bases. And I think this guy's going to steal bases too. Oswald. I always want to say Oswaldo. I'm sorry, Peraza. Put up really good numbers, reached AAA. Some question marks again about where he's going to play as well, but really impressed while reaching AAA at a fairly young age. I like him. I think he's another prospect I think is better for fantasy than he is long-term because of the fact that I do think he's going to steal bases. Doesn't have like elite speed, but I think he's going to steal enough bases for and gets a good enough jumps for it to matter. So yeah, it kind of reminds me stolen base by a little bit of Kyle Tucker, where not an elite runner, but certainly a guy who gets good jumps and can steal 20 to 25 bases if Houston gives him the chance and if New York gives this guy a chance. All right, we just talked about how Cleveland has a bunch of guys like these. He's the best of them. George Valera, a guy who's been on my top 100 list for a little over a year and a half now. Really like the offensive upside here, but again, very much a long-term play and some work to be done, that's for sure. Nick Gonzalez, a guy who, look, his numbers were good, but they're even better if you take away, like he had a 1 for 36 slump or something along those lines. No questions really about the hit tool, although, you know, there's a little bit of coil in his swing that I don't love, and sometimes he can get a little off balance. question marks to power. And, he hit for decent pop this year, but he's gotten to play in some friendly confines. He really got to play in friendly confines when he was at New Mexico State, not just playing in a league or a conference that was way, way below him, but also playing in a very friendly hitting format, or a place where the ball just jumps. So, but yeah, I do like Nick Gonzalez. Definitely a second baseman, which hurts him a little bit, but it's what it is. Carson Tucker, talked about him a little bit when we got I believe we got an auto. No, we didn't get an auto, but we got a decent Bowman card of him a little bit ago. A little overdrafted, but Cleveland's done pretty well with this type of profile before. Long-term play, can see him being a average starting shortstop. Nothing wrong with that, or maybe he has to make a move, but there's some stuff to like him. Here we go with an auto, and this is a guy we've gotten an auto from before. Marcus Smith, acquired in the Elvis Andrus trade. Surprised that we are seeing the auto as the A's, but it kind of goes to show you that these things are not always done ahead of time. The definition of a fourth outfielder profile, like maybe he's good enough defensively that he works his way as a starter. So, not great, but a guy who we could see become a regular at some point. And if not, a guy who earns some playing time. You could do worse. Let's see if we've got anybody else interested here. Nope, we'll move on to pack number 2. Don't want to do too many repeats. AFL was a lot of fun. We talked about it in the podcast. Really good talent. I wish the pitching would have been a little better, but Bobby Miller really impressed me. I wouldn't mind seeing a Bobby Miller card in here. He is I won't say star, but it's not hard for me to see him pitching at the top of a rotation someday. I was really impressed. Fastball up to 98 miles an hour. Good secondary stuff. But outside of that, the pitching was pretty gross. And here's a guy whose stock really improved. Didn't get a chance to see him as much as I would have liked to in Arizona. But Gabriel Moreno, a lot of people think he's the best catching prospect in baseball as soon as Adley Rutschman graduates. And I get it, because above average hit, above average pop, should be able to stick behind the plate. I mean, a huge improvement. Like not an unknown coming into the year, but he went from that to a legitimate top 20 prospect. Definitely a guy that people need to keep an eye on. Jojo Gray, a guy who came over in that Max Scherzer, Trey Turner trade. I don't think that the Dodgers are going to regret it. Especially if they can get Trey Turner signed to a deal. It won't be. But I don't think the Nationals should feel bad about it necessarily either, because this guy has a chance to pitch near the top of the rotation, and then Keibert Ruiz is one of the best catching prospects in baseball. Catcher is just loaded right now. It's as good as, in my years of doing this, and you can see the white in my beard, I've been doing it for a while. Catcher's as good as I can remember it. Like there is star potential at the top, and there is tons of quantity. It's a very interesting time for that stuff. So it's kind of a fun throwback card. Garrett Anderson. Garrett Anderson. Oh, look at him. He's a cute little kid. My best friend, one of my very, very best friends, a guy named Elliot DeLuca. I guess you can probably guess where his family was from the name Elliot DeLuca. His huge Angels fans, and they hated Garrett Anderson. They loved him, but they got so frustrated from him because talk about the hole in the bucket. But when he made hard contact, it was hard contact. Austin Martin. So his stock has slid. I'm not going to lie to you. Like I still like him a lot, but talking to scouts and stuff, there are a lot of people who are just not sure that he's going to hit for power without a massive swing change. So the question mark is with the massive swing change, because I think it's going to happen. I do think the Twins are going to say, hey, we want this power, that we want you to unlock this raw power. Can he still hit it for average and do that? Because if he can, then he is that top 10 prospect that I thought he was coming out of that draft. Not just top 10 for the draft, top 10 overall prospect. But if not, there's some question marks. I love the approach. Love the versatility still. So I would still be investing in him, but it is worth pointing out that he is not the sure thing. Again, sure thing being a relative term with prospects. Diego Cartaya, I did talk to one scout who said that he is the most talented catching prospect in baseball, and that includes Adley Rutschman. And I made sure to ask if he thought that. Now, look, talent is not the same thing as production, and he was very productive at times during this season. There's a ton to like about him, but he's very much a long-term play still. But that's impressive. Like when you're talking about that, because scouts love Adley Rutschman, but Diego Cartea's talent. And same thing is true about a ton of other catchers. Adley Rutschman isn't necessarily the most talented. It's just the fact that he is as safe of a prospect as you can come up with, which is why he's so high. And plenty talented too, but the safety is something that people like. Antoine Kelly, I think he's probably a reliever long-term, but he could be a really good one, like fastball slider combination or fastball, whatever he wants to call his breaking ball. Should miss a lot of bats. Question marks about the command. Nick Prado, one of the most improved. What he and MJ Melendez did in terms of improvement can't be overstated. It really can't. Like the fact that he went from being I hate the B word, but like there were a lot of people saying bust with both of those guys. They went from being that in 2019 to doing good work that we had no real proof of in those training offsites in 2020 to putting up monster numbers. I think Nick Prado has a chance to be an above average regular at first base for a guy that at one point a lot of people were wondering if he was going to be anything. He's somebody I think is worth keeping an eye on for 2022. Because Kansas City, again, probably not going to be very good. And I imagine they'll find a way to get his bat and Melendez's bat into the lineup. All right. Quinn Priester, a first-round pick. I think his stock dropped a little bit this year. There were a lot of people who were real high on him because he was just really impressive in the fall. Didn't get the chance to show that stuff this summer, but still a guy I think who has a chance to pitch in the mid-rotation stuff, a prospect that I'll definitely be keeping my eye on. Hey, there's our buddy. Spencer Torkelson. Again, like everything just jumped off this dude's bat in Arizona, and I wasn't surprised. I did catch him the very first at bat I saw him, and of course I was recording open video. Was a bad strikeout, but strikeouts are going to happen. I mean, they were happening before the great launch angle change of whatever year. They're going to continue. I know people don't like them, but they're going to happen. But I still think he's got a real chance for a plus hit tool and easy plus power, maybe even 80 someday. Yeah, he's a very special offensive prospect. Here's a nice little insert. Asa Lacy. Guy really was not great in the regular season, but gotten really good reports for him in Arizona. Didn't get a chance to watch him pitch, but one of like 3 pitchers that have actually impressed in Arizona. Some of it has to do with the offense being really good, and then some of it has to do with the fact that they just did not send a lot of good pitching down there. Bryce Ball, he was the I believe the Anthony Rizzo trade. Yep, yeah. I'm going without a net here, so if some of this stuff is wrong, just leave it in the comments and give me heck. But Bryce Ball is interesting. Like he has the size and he has the raw power to be maybe a starting first baseman someday. Good on base skills at times. I would guess he is, if he becomes a starter, we're talking about bottom range first baseman, but worth a look and not a bad return for a guy. I don't think Anthony Rizzo was necessarily in their long-term plans, especially with the way he's struggling. Maybe now. I mean, the Cubs have a lot of money to spend, but definitely didn't mind that trade. This guy got off to a great start. Gunnar Henderson of Baltimore just tore the cover off the baseball and impressively made a 3-jump level, like started in low A and made it all the way to double A. Struggled in double A and wasn't great in high A either, but a former basically first-round pick who has all the tools necessary to be a starting shortstop or start somewhere in the infield. Maybe, I guess you could move him to the outfield. Some work to be done, but there's a lot to like from what we saw. Gunnar Henderson will be firmly in my top 100 when magazine time comes around. And then Ethan Hankins, I love that he's in that organization because we have seen what Cleveland can do with these type of pitching profiles, like even lesser pitching profiles. That's why I'm so high on Cal Quantrill. I was so impressed with what he saw. I think they'll be able to do some real nice things with Ethan Hankins going forward, but a long-term play to be sure. All right. You guys like the design of these cards? I like them. I mean, they're not, again, they are not cards that you're going to see on eBay selling for thousands of dollars, but as a PC, as you can say, a personal collector, not a personal computer. I'm not that smart. But I do think that as someone who collects this stuff more than is looking to sell it, not that I haven't sold some cards on eBay in my time, but as somebody who's more about the collecting portion, I do kind of like these cards. They are, they've got that old school feel to them. And again, I love prospects. Can't help it. All right. Max Meyer, my good buddy RJ Anderson, nicknamed this guy the Murder Hornet, and I get it. He has absolutely filthy stuff. Not the biggest guy, a little bit of concerns with durability, but not concerns about the stuff, man. Like, that is a pitcher who, if everything works out, can be one of the true aces in baseball. Some volatility, again, because of the size and because he's never really put up the workload. Also really curious to see what the heck Miami is going to do with all of these starters, man. There are so many talented arms, volatile arms, but talented arms that they have in that system. I'll be really curious to see what they do going forward. Let's see. Miguel Amaya, that's kind of an interesting one. So a couple years ago, this guy was on the verge of being a top 5 catching prospect in baseball. Some of the reason for the fall has to do with him not quite performing to the level of it, and some of it has to do with the catcher explosion. We talked about it a couple times now. There are just so many good catchers in baseball right now that it's not necessarily his fault. There's a little Andrew Jones, cute little guy again. Should be in the Hall of Fame. Andrew Jones should be in the Hall of Fame. And if anyone disagrees with that, don't leave a comment because I'll just ignore it. But yeah, I think he absolutely has a chance, or he should be in Cooperstown. Elliot Ramos, a lot of work to do if he ever wants to make Cooperstown, like reach the majors. But a bit of a disappointing season. I have gone from being too low to Elliot Ramos to being too high on Elliot Ramos, and I'm probably just about right now with the industry where he's about a top 75 to 80 prospect. Flawed. There are flaws in his skill set, but there are a lot of pluses too. And one of them is the fact that I think he's going to hit for power for sure. I think he can provide some steals while playing some decent defense. Is he going to get on enough for those things to matter? There's a fun one. Pete Crow Armstrong, a first-round pick of the Mets, but obviously got traded in the Javi Baez trade. Was performing pretty well until the injury that knocked him out for the year. Assuming that's not a long-term thing, I think that's a trade that the Cubs are not as fun as Javi Baez was. It sure seems like he was going to change organizations, whether he should or not, whether you believe that the Cubs should be doing this cheap rebuild or not. It is what is happening. But I could see him being a top of the order hitter for them. The Cubs now have some pretty interesting outfield options now, I think. And Pete Crow Armstrong, more of a 2024 guy, probably maybe 2023 if everything goes right. But yeah, especially in fantasy because he can steal bases. A guy that I think is a better prospect to rank in fantasy than in real life because I do think that he has the chance to help in that category. All right. Still got one more auto to go, unless I missed it, but I don't think I did. All right. Glenn Allen Hill Jr. is pretty much, I wouldn't say he's a non-prospect, but it's more interesting to talk about because his name is Glenn Allen Hill Jr., former Mariner legend. Not really, but he did hit one of the furthest home runs I've seen while he was a member of the Cubs. I think we've all seen this. Here's a guy I really like. Corbin Carroll, a guy who was on his way, I think, to being a top, maybe not top 10, but top 15 to top 20 prospect. He might rank there even still for me. I have Alec Thomas ahead of him overall. But Corbin Carroll's skill set is really interesting in real life and in fantasy because There were concerns about power. He really has shown that was kind of a silly concern, adapted to the new swing really well. I still think he can hit for average as well. Good defensive player. Was an absolute steal for them in the middle of the first round. So as long as he's still that same player, I think Corbin Carroll has a chance to be very good. This guy really struggled in the majors, but I don't have too many long-term concerns. My one long-term concern, I guess, is for someone as fast as he is and he can fly, pretty bad defensive player. Like, a lot of people were giving him 55 grades, like coming out of Long Beach State. I don't know what's gone on there. But when we were talking, we make jokes about the working on the defense thing, and a lot of times for good reason, because it's really a cop-out to keep a guy. There are some legitimate defensive issues with Jarren Duran, but there are some real offensive upsides here too. And with some work, maybe he becomes a well above average defensive player. I mean, I've talked about it a lot, but Nolan Arenado was a bad defensive player coming out of his draft class, and now is one of the best defenders ever to play the position. So there is time, and he certainly has the athleticism to be a helper. Adley Rutschman, I like that insert. It's kind of a fun looking card. It kind of reminds me of, you guys remember Schoolhouse Rock? That little font there. I mean, if we're doing a real life list, he's pretty easily the best prospect in baseball to me. 60 hit on the 2080 scale, 60 power on the 2080 scale, maybe 60 glove on the 2080 scale. I mean, that might be pushing it a little bit, but I get the concern for next year for some fantasy folks, because rookie catchers historically have been bad. That's just the way it is. But I think he's an exception that I don't really know what exception proves truly means, but I definitely think he's an exception there. The only question is how long the Orioles plan to manipulate his service time. Daniel Cabrera, a guy I really liked coming out of LSU. Probably a fourth outfielder. We've said that a few times, but sometime there. There's certainly a reason why he was picked fairly high in that draft. I would give it some time. If you're an investor or a collector, give that some time. Aurelvis Martinez, or to me, one of the reasons why it was easier for them to trade Austin Martin. I mean, they are loaded in infield prospects. I really like the look of that card too. That's a really sharp looking card. If it was possible to get stuff graded too, that's very nicely centered. Superstar potential. And the Blue Jays have a few guys like this that have high upside in the middle infield, but he's the best of the best. And I could see him, depending on what they do, being a starter for them at some point, maybe at third base. They have options. Some of it's going to depend, and I wrote about this in the team roundup, what happens with Marcus Semien. And I imagine Kevon Biggio can't be a long-term starter for them right now, but yeah, a lot to like there. Austin Wells doing very nicely in the Arizona Fall League, first-round pick out of Arizona. Guy I'd be looking to invest in as well, just partially because Yankee prospects always have a high value, and I think he has a very good chance to be their starting catcher maybe in 2 years. I wouldn't guess next year, but maybe in 2 years I could see him being not an elite defender by any stretch of the imagination, but I believe the power is real. Left-handed hitter in Yankee Stadium is not a thing to ignore. Yeah, I like Austin Wells quite a bit. Candidate maybe for my top 100. Jordan Adams, superb athlete. Long way to go. But I do think there is some upside in Jordan Adams' bat. It is interesting here that he apparently has no neck, built like a football player. But yeah, that is definitely a guy that I like long term, but a lot of risk that comes with it. Oh, another little mini, and it's another Detroit Tiger, Riley Green. Was really hoping I was going to get a chance to see Green in the Arizona Fall League, but was glad that the Tigers didn't take that chance because these are exhibition games, and his long-term health is way more important than baseball, and certainly more important than exhibition games in Arizona. For those who don't know, he was still dealing with lingering effects from concussion, but when he's healthy, as talented as an outfield prospect in baseball, I think he and Brennan Davis compete kind of for the second best outfield prospect behind Julio Rodriguez. And then when Julio graduates, and I imagine that'll be in May. Of course, it's possible Riley Green graduates around that time too. But yeah, Riley Green, very good real life prospect, very good fantasy prospect. I'm probably too low on Jordan Walker. I have him right now competing for the top 50. Some people think this is a top 25 prospect. And I get it. The good athlete, legitimate power, should be able to play third base. I have some questions about being able to hit for average. I also wonder if third base is a long-term position, like not because of him per se, but because, you know, if Nolan Arenado's there in the long term, he's not moving off third base anytime soon. And if Nolan Gorman's going to play second base, I don't think Jordan Walker is a guy who can play shortstop. So maybe you're talking about left field, right field, but regardless, or maybe he's a guy who changes organizations because they can use him as a trade chip. But I get the 30-plus homer potential is definitely palpable. Isaiah Campbell of the Seattle Mariners, kind of underlooked because the Mariners have a ton of interesting pitching prospects. I think he's more of that 2-inning relief bulk guy, but maybe a chance to be a starter or maybe a chance to be a really good reliever. Didn't put up great numbers. Boy, that's another. Sometimes these glasses just don't give the players their best look. But yeah, I like Isaiah Campbell as that, but a guy who's more valuable in real life than a guy who is more valuable in fantasy. And this guy's the exact opposite. And that's not to say that he's not a good prospect in real life. Xavier Edwards is an extremely underrated to me fantasy prospect because he has a chance to steal 50 bases. Like he can fly. And a solid defender at second base. The thing that hurts him is the fact that he's in Tampa Bay and they have like 40 of these dudes. Like they just kind of seem to, they don't grow on trees, but they develop them very, very well. So he's a guy who might have to change orgs to reach his full potential, but I do like Xavier Edwards quite a bit. All right, let's see here. Nick York. Was wrong about Nick York, a player that I got a late report on that said, hey, this guy is interesting and could go in the top 3 rounds. Then he ended up going, I think it was 15th. He can hit. Like he's a very good offensive player, and he should be able to stick at second base. A guy who's competing now for my top 100 spots. Like I was wrong about Nick York. And part of it is because I just didn't have enough information on Nick York. And when you hear top 3 rounds and then they end up going in the top half of the first round, it kind of makes you wonder if that's a great selection. There was even some people who were saying that they were tanking that draft class. Obviously not. Nick York can absolutely play. Let's see. One of the most unfortunate named prospects, DL Hall. Of course, it should be IL Hall now. No, I'm kidding. It's a terrible joke. Very good stuff. Probably their second best pitching prospect. A couple of 60 pitches, a couple of 55 pitches. Needs to stay healthy. Needs to show that he can put it together for a full, consistent seasons, but right around a top 75 prospect. This guy's really good. Marco Luciano. And again, I really like that baseball. That it does give me that Schoolhouse Rock feel to it. So I talked about this a little with Colin when we talked about my AFL trip, that he was on. He asked me if anybody disappointed, and I listed Luciano as one of the guys who did. And it had nothing to do with what Marco Luciano did or didn't do. It's just I was told, or I guess I should say I got the impression that this was more of a lock to stick at shortstop. I don't think he's anything close to a lock to stick at shortstop. I think he's a third baseman actually long term. He is swole. It is very difficult for that profile, I think, to stay at shortstop long term, especially if we're moving to the shift where shortstop defense and second base defense are about to get a lot more important. And I do think there's a chance of that. Then I definitely think he's a third baseman. But even if with no shift, I think he's moved to third base. All that being said, the power is stupid, and the ball jumps off of this dude's bat. So still absolutely a top 10 prospect, just probably not the top 5 prospect that I was thinking coming into Arizona. And again, it was a late look, but after talking to some scouts as well, I think it's fair to say that's a fun one, or a fun one. That's a fair one, I should say. Zach Vane. So Zach Vane, first round pick that I immediately moved up on my list because of the fact that he was moving to Colorado, and then he had a little bit of struggle with the bat to start the year, and then really came on strong. The one thing I'll caution with him is you look at his stolen base totals, and they were just stupid high. Definitely, I think a guy who took advantage of that rule with the pickoff stuff, but I still like him a lot in fantasy. A 20 steal guy, chance for 30 homers in Coors Field, gonna get on base. A legitimate top 20 fantasy prospect for me right now. Ryan Verlade, his teammate. I think he's more of a bench bat guy. Could see him being a regular, meaning playing relatively close to every day with Colorado in a rebuilding type situation, but long term, I think his best option is bench bats. Burl Caraway, so he was the top relief prospect. I still think he was the best relief prospect in that class of pure relievers anyway. Command was not great this year, but I do think he has a chance to someday pitch, maybe in the 8th inning and maybe the 9th inning. Here's a fun one, another mini. Pedro Leon, one of the most controversial, I guess, prospects that I've talked to scouts about. Some people really like him. Some people think he has a chance to be a top of the order hitter, hit some power, steal some bases. Some people think he's more organizational depth. I got a really bad report from somebody when I was in Arizona that suggested bad things that I'm not allowed to. Nothing personally about him, but about his skill set. So, it's just a question mark of which version we see. And to be fair, he was awful to start the year, awful, and then made some nice adjustments. And then the higher level again started awful. So I don't know. Pedro Leon to me is not the best prospect in the Houston system. To me, that would be Jeremy Pena, which is not a take that is shared by many, but worth a look. I think his card value, if I was somebody who was selling, Pedro Leon would be somebody I'd be looking to sell high on. That's just my personal opinion. I have never been wrong before. Yes, I have. Victor Mesa Jr., a guy we haven't heard very much about or hasn't been talked about very much since he was a pretty famous signing for the Marlins coming out of Cuba. I think he's pretty much a little better than organizational depth, maybe, but I don't think we're talking about a regular. A guy that not a lot of people are talking about that I like is this guy right here, Brandon Lewis. A guy who took advantage of playing in some friendly confines, but power is legit. Like, I believe he ended the year with 30 homers. If you're looking for a deep sleeper type, especially like in an NL-only league, I think Brandon Lewis has a chance to be a regular. I'm not sure exactly where he plays best. I think he would definitely be a guy who benefits if we are moving over to designated hero full-time, and here's hoping we are. But yeah, that's a guy I like a lot that is not getting enough hubbub. This guy got quite a bit of hubbub when he was playing Babe Ruth. Cute kid. A lot of discourse about Babe Ruth that I'm just really not interested in getting into. But Shohei Ohtani is a better baseball player, so I guess I just get into it. Aaron Ashby, didn't wow necessarily in his limited look with Milwaukee, but I think if you watched him pitch, you saw the flashes of brilliance, and you saw why he's such an intriguing guy. I think I'll have him in my top 100 to start the year. I actually need to look and make sure he qualifies, but I do like him quite a bit long-term. Question marks about what exactly his role is, but I do like him. It's interesting. It's got the traded Gabriel Arias. It's interesting. I'm reading in the back. So that obviously Gabriel Arias was involved in the Mike Clevenger trade. Maybe the best prospect that headed over that way. I think he's more a utility player, but that's not necessarily the consensus on Gabriel Arias. I could definitely see him being a starter long term, but more that utility guy. I try not to go too harsh on these prospects, like when we're opening this stuff. Can you tell? I really like to keep it positive, but it's not always easy. But I do like Gabriel Arias. Let's see. I've talked about Reed Detmers in every single one of these things, and I'll just say it again. I think Reed Detmers is a very good real-life pitcher, and I think that he's going to miss bats. But I do think that we maybe got a little carried away with the stats that he was putting up because he was such an advanced pitcher. Like I talked about this after the draft, as he was being a prospect that I thought could make his major league debut that year. Instead, that one ended up being Garrett Crochet, who earned that role. But I don't think he's like a fantasy superstar. I just don't. I think he is more of that mid-rotation guy who's going to help the Angels. And boy, can they use arms like him too. But if you're expecting fantasy fireworks, I think you're expecting a little too much. Let's see. Another mini. Nick Gonzalez, we talked about him. Good offensive baseball player, just some question marks about what exactly he is. Long term. I think it's a starting second baseman, though. Speaking of starting second baseman, Justin Foskey, guy who is competing to be in my top 100 as well. No real standout tool, but no real standout weakness either. It'd be better if he was a shortstop because those profiles are a little easier to see. But I like him a lot. I could see him being a 270, 280, 20 homer, 80 RBI, 15 steal guy for a long time. Nothing wrong with that at all. This guy's a lot better than that, though. His name's Wander Franco. I don't know if people have talked to you about him before, but I'm going to wax poetically about him for the next 45 minutes. No. He's, just an absolute superstar. Like what he did after no minor league season last year to be that good, to have an on-base streak that long. Are you kidding me? What an absolute superstar. This guy doesn't have that kind of potential, but I think he is super underrated. Tyler Freeman, a guy who I think should be in consideration for top 50 prospect lists. Second base hurts, but I really like that hit tool. I think it's got a chance to be plus, and I think there's more power to come. So I think he could be that 15 to 18 homer guy that also hits like 300, maybe steals 10 to 15 bases as well. Doesn't get talked about nearly enough to me. I really like Tyler Freeman, a guy who I think is a candidate to, maybe help the Guardians next year. Could see him absolutely being a helper and a person that I am personally collecting for card stuff because, again, I think people just aren't paying enough attention to his talent. All right, just a few more. Matt Manning did not impress this year. There were a few starts that said, oh, okay, that's the reminder of that guy that a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, had this guy ranked ahead of both Scubble and Mize. Not happening now, obviously, and it doesn't really matter where they'd rank him because none of them are prospects anymore, technically. But I bet you Manning's better next year. This is a super athletic dude who gets downhill, has shown plus fastball and curveball at time. Lots of guys struggle in their first taste of baseball. I imagine that he is one that will have a chance to help quite a bit. Just checking to see if we have an auto. Nope. It's coming, though, I bet. Casey Martin, a guy who I like a lot in fantasy because of power speed. Hit tool needs a lot of work, and I'm not quite sure where he's going to play defensively. Jordan Westberg, a basically first-round pick. I think technically it's second round. Again, similar to Foskey, and they were college teammates. I think that they I don't think it was great value, but I do think he has a chance to be a starter. I kind of forgot to check on questions, and we just got one. That's great. Any chance Torkelson is up before the All-Star game in 2022, he would be a 16th round keeper in a 6x6 OPS league. That's a fun format, by the way. Yeah, I do think there's a chance. And 16th round, so I imagine you're playing with like 22, 23 keepers. Yeah, I think I would consider that, just because, look, you're turning over a lot of the roster after that point anyway. And to get a chance at a guy who I think will be eligible at third base to start the year, who can hit 280, hit a rate of 30 homers, that type of thing. Yeah, and I would definitely bet he's up before the All-Star game, as long as he handles AAA the way I think he will. Yeah, I think I would keep Spencer Torkelson in that situation. Thank you for the question. So Jeter Downs had an awful season, like awful, and I apologize for the histrionics here, but he was really bad. And it's kind of amplified by the fact that he was the best prospect traded in the Mookie Betts trade. But I will say he's having a very nice Arizona Fall League and showing off the power. Any sign of positivity there is nice, because he looked lost at times this season. So, and you're very welcome, James. Adley Rutschman, we talked about him. Best real life prospect in baseball. Solid top 5 fantasy prospect in baseball for me. Not quite that high, but he'll probably be in the top 20 for me. Vidal Brujan. You're going to look at those major league numbers and wonder what's going wrong. And just keep in mind that it was like, I believe, 26 at bats and not playing every day. Impossible almost for young players to succeed in that type of role. It's just not something that is fair to ask a young player to do. So, yeah, don't give up on Vidal Brujan. Wouldn't be shocked if he changes organizations. I don't know if you guys just saw that, but I almost flipped over my entire table because I was that passionate about Vidal Brujan. It's not because I'm an idiot. And then James Beard. The only reason I'm doing that is because I love that name. If you watch Top Chef, James Beard. That's the top award. The name's better than the prospect. I hate being mean. I wish James Beard nothing but luck, because I've got lots of puns ready for him if he is successful. Boy, I tell you what, these Topps Heritage cards, and I love you, Topps, you don't need to protect them like they're Fort Knox. You really don't. All right, let's see. We just talked about Jeter Downs. Just talked about him. I've not talked a lot about him. Nolan Gorman. I think what he's doing right now is super impressive. He's young for the age, even for the bat. But playing second base at this, it's pretty impressive, because he was definitely a third baseman, like all the way through. And it is his best position. But I think he's got a chance to stick there based on the reports. I'd like to see it live. I didn't get the chance to see him play defense when I was in Arizona, so kind of a bummer there. But all the reports are good. And if he can stick in second base, his fantasy profile goes up, because we're talking about a 30-homer guy at second base rather than third. So definitely something to keep an eye on. JT Ginn, a guy who was maybe going to be a top 10 pick, maybe higher, before Tommy John surgery. A long way to go in that recovery, but do think he has a chance to be a mid-rotation starter. And as fun as it is to make fun of the Mets, they've done a pretty good job with that type of profile. So there's something that I think could be interesting. All of these guys are repeats. All right, 3 more packs. Still waiting on 1 more auto. And thank you guys for joining me. It's been fun. I love opening this stuff. And I think it's a cool way, especially with these minor league stuff, to talk about some prospects, show off some of the cool cards, and, you know, give me a chance to do something on a Tuesday afternoon. What else do I got to do? All right, we just talked about him a little bit. Alec Thomas. So if I could do the Elliott Reed "I told you so" dance about Alec Thomas, I would, because I've been high on this guy since he was a prospect in high school. He's been even better than I thought he would be, but I really like Alec Thomas. I think he's a guy who will be, every year for the magazine, I do a top blank for blank, and this year it'll be a top 22 for 22. Alec Thomas will be there and there for sure, because there's, after what he did even in AAA, and it was a smaller sample size than what he did at the lower level, but guy I think who has a chance for above average hit, above average power, and to steal some bases, and there's nothing wrong with that. A guy who I think can really help next year, and especially in the long term. Let's see here. Oh, it looks like we got a numbered card. That's kind of fun. Again, Spencer Torkelson, nice little action shot there. I actually got, not to brag again, but in a break last night, I got a Spencer Torkelson out of 10. Not autographed, but I can't complain about a Spencer Torkelson out of 10. That's for sure. Jerry Kelly, we've talked about a few times in these things. Not a good first professional season, but there was a reason why I thought he was the best prep arm in that class. I would not give up on him long term, but it's a very much long term speculative play. All right, so this is Daniel Cabrera, who we talked about a little bit. Just if you can see that, it's so tough with the lighting, but oh, there you go. Yeah, 43 out of 50. Cool. Like the look of that. It's got the nice black border to let you know that it is numbered. Okay. Oh, these are 3 fun ones, and then we've got 2 more packs. Cody Ho's really bad this year, but a former first-round pick out of Baylor. Lots of guys have. Development is not linear. So while Cody Ho's stock has certainly dropped for a good reason, still, I think a long-term play. Speaking of long-term plays, Bo Naylor starting to put it together. Has not been as good as I thought he would be, but a catcher with that type of power from the left side, still, I think, a guy who's definitely worth investing in and is worth, especially in AL-only keeper leagues, a guy to keep an eye on in deeper formats. Then Robert Hassell. I was surprised when Hassell went ahead of Zach Vane in that draft, but might have been the right call. It might have been the right call. I like Vane better for fantasy, but I think Hassell might be a little bit better overall real-life player with a bit of a higher floor. But in both must-haves in any type of keeper league that will allow it, because I think Hassell and Vane both have a chance to hit for a decent average and plenty of power. So yeah, those are 2 guys to like for sure. But I criticized that pick, so to speak, and it's tough because you don't know what the signability is and yada yada yada. But I did think Vane was the better prospect. It's very possible that Hassell was the better prospect. Again, I've never been wrong before. But Edward Cabrera. I mean, the swing and miss stuff is palpable. Like you watch this dude pitch and you wonder how he's not striking out 13 batters a game, and then you take a look and he was striking out 13 batters a game at one point during his rehab. Command has got to get better, but there is a chance that of all these talented arms, and that includes Sixto Sanchez, that includes Max Meyer, includes all of them, that this guy, Edward Cabrera, is the best of the bunch. He certainly has as high of a floor to me, or high of a ceiling to me, as anyone sans Meyer. So yeah, definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Vaughn Grisham, if you want to feel real old, the son of Marquise Grisham. Impressed this year, probably going to be a candidate for my top 10 list for the Braves. Some question marks defensively, but the athleticism, not quite as good an athlete as his dad, but that's asking a lot. And we do have our auto in this one. It's not Simeon Woods Richardson, but another guy that I was too low on, then too high on, and now I think I'm settling into where I'm in the right spot, right at the bottom end of top 100 prospects. I think he's more high floor than high ceiling. The type of guy that I think can give you a lot of 6-inning, 3-run starts. And there's that you look at the ERA and you say, oh, that's not impressive, but that's usable, man. That is very usable in today's game. Nick Bitsko, a.k.a. Nabisco, missed the entire season while rehabbing. I mean, the Rays do so well with this type of profile, but it's very much a wait-and-see game. And here's our auto, Gage Workman, the other guy drafted by Detroit out of Arizona State. Looks to me like that first, third corner infield type that you play against left-handers. That type of profile, but maybe a chance to be a regular. Wouldn't say I'm disappointed in the 2 autos, but you certainly could have done better. I would have loved to have seen a Torkelson or someone along that line, but solid. All guys that have a very good chance to be major league players, and there is nothing wrong with that. Briefly touch on Christian Robinson. You could argue he's the most talented player in the entire Arizona system, and that's saying something. It's a good system. But there are things that I'm not going to even bring up in the stream, not because I'm afraid to talk about them, but because they are too complicated and out of my depth to talk about. Give Christian Robinson a Google to find out what's going on there. Yeah, there is a lot going on with Christian Robinson, and I will not comment further on that. Ji-Hwan Bae, a guy who also had some off-field issues, but I will talk briefly about his skill set. A second baseman who can steal a ton of bases and I think can hit for average. Maybe being a little underrated right now in terms of fantasy. He was a guy I had as a top 100 guy coming into 2020. He won't be on the list this year, but look, there's only so many top 100 guys you can have. There's literally 100. But I do think he has a chance to be a regular, steal 20, 25 bases. Maybe profiles best as a bench type because I don't know if he's going to hit for a ton of power. Not an elite defender at any position. So could be that guy who plays all over the field, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. One more pack. Nick Lodolo. I've been calling him Lodolo, and I've been corrected so many times that I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. I mean, again, it's similar to the Reed Detmers thing where I think he's a better real-life prospect than a fantasy one, but that doesn't mean he can't help you in fantasy too. That doesn't mean that Nick Lodolo can't be that guy who, gives you some wins because he should keep you in games, maybe puts up some 6-inning, 8 strikeout totals. Not always going to be able to count on strikeouts from him, but there was a reason this guy was the 7th pick of his draft. He is out of TCU. He is a talented guy, but I think, again, if you're expecting fantasy fireworks from him, if you think he's going to be that next, not even Jacob deGrom, if you think he's going to be that next 6 through 10 type starting pitcher in terms of fantasy, you're expecting too much. You just are. Heston Kierstad. So, again, a situation that we're just kind of figuring out going forward. I just hope he's healthy. I wish you the very best. 2nd pick of that 2020 draft. I thought it was a reach, but I'm not going to say anything negative about him because he's got health stuff that's way more important. Get well soon, and I hope you see us proving a lot of people wrong. Again, another one of those cool inserts with Nick Gonzalez. I think I've talked about him 3 times today. I'm not going to talk about him again. Antonio Gomez is kind of an interesting one. Long-term, very long-term. I believe he is. I love how I'm saying I believe he is, like I'm not just going to look. So on November 13th, he will turn 20. Happy birthday, Antonio Gomez. A couple days early, 11 days early. But long-term, he does have a chance to be a catcher of the future. I would say in terms of talent, he's better than Austin Wells. In terms of chances to reach his ceiling, I'll give Wells the better odds because I've seen him do it, and we're seeing him do it in the Arizona Fall League. So that's something to keep in mind there. But again, as a long-term play, and we've seen Yankees, he's definitely somebody I would be willing to take a look at. Blaze Jordan. So Blaze Jordan is, again, I'm not trying to be negative here. I don't quite get it in terms of the card hype. And if you take a look at eBay stuff or auction stuff or whatever, you will see that Blaze Jordan stuff goes for a pretty penny. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that he is kind of like a YouTube star. Like he is somebody popular. He's got a cool name too. But like in terms of like talent, he's a legitimate top 10 prospect in that system. But boy, I'd be looking to sell high. And I hope this comes back and bites me in the tuchus and that you guys all come back here and say, look at this big fat idiot talking negative about one of the best third basemen in baseball. But I just don't see it. So that'll do it. Again, our 2 autos were Gage Workman and Marcus Smith. Not the best, not the worst, but I had a lot of fun. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me. Stay tuned. We're sure to be doing this again in a couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for all of our stuff going on. It's lots of good stuff. NBCSportsEdge.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Crawford_MILB. Stay safe. Thanks again, and we will talk to you guys again very soon.